Hi, everyone. My name is Drew. I'm a pastor here in Midtown Manhattan at a church called Hope Midtown, which is part of the larger Hope Church NYC family of churches. I first heard about the coronavirus back in January of this year. There was a friend who was living in China along with his wife and their dog, and he had posted that there was an illness that was going around and that many of the neighboring towns and cities that he was in were going into lockdown. Thankfully, he was able to go to South Korea, and his wife, who's a Korean national, was able to go there, and they were there together. And during that time, I started to read news reports about what was happening in China and in Asia and this coronavirus, which was spreading. And never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined that somehow the coronavirus would end up infecting the US and New York City, and that we today would be at the epicenter of this outbreak that has really debilitated the rest of the world. And I remember thinking in those early days, as I would pray for my friend who was in China again, doing his best to get to Korea, I remember thinking, oh yeah, there's no way it would come here. And even if it did come here, our healthcare system is unbelievable. We live in the wealthiest country in the world. Moreover, there was this New York attitude and self-belief that somehow, that our genetic makeup as New Yorkers would lead us to be impervious to any of the infections or the disease, that it was simply something that we'd get over and that it wouldn't infect us the way it has. And yet the recent reports, as of this recording, is that more than 12,000 people have passed away. It's been an incredibly difficult season for us, for our city, for our church, for our churches, and for our country. And as I was reflecting on this talk about surrendering to Jesus as King, one of the memories that came to me as I was preparing was the memory of when I was first thinking about the coronavirus and thinking about the fact that it was actually coming upon our shores. And here in New York City, that things were starting to close down and fear started to emerge within our city and even within our own family. And I remember the immediate thoughts were, oh no, what's going to happen to the economy? What's going to happen financially? How is this going to affect our church? How is this going to affect me? And all of these different layers of stuff that was happening internally started to come to the surface. A friend of mine named Sarah Bournes, who's our pastor of formation and mission, she actually wrote a poem called Exposed. And it's a poem about the coronavirus and especially how it was really impacting us in more ways than we could see. And this is what she writes. She wrote, "We've all been exposed, not necessarily to the virus, though maybe, who knows? We've all been exposed by the virus. Corona is exposing us, exposing our weak sides, exposing our dark sides, exposing what normally lies far beneath the surface of our souls, hidden by the invisible masks we wear, now exposed by the paper masks we can't hide far enough behind. Corona is exposing our addiction to comfort, our obsession with control, our compulsion to hoard, our protection of self. Corona is peeling back our layers, tearing down our walls, revealing our illusions, leveling our best laid plans. Corona is exposing the gods we worship, our health, our hurry, our sense of security, our favorite lies, our secret lusts, our misplaced trust. Corona is calling everything into question. What is the church without a building? What is my worth without an income? How do we plan without certainty? How do we love despite risk? Corona is exposing me, my mindless numbing, my endless scrolling, my careless words, my fragile nerves. We've all been exposed. Our junk laid bare, our fears made known. The Band-Aid torn, the masquerade done. So what now? What's left? Clean hands, clear eyes, tender hearts. What Corona reveals, God can heal. Come, Lord Jesus, have mercy on us." I must admit, when I first heard that poem, it rang so true for my own life, because my initial response to everything that was happening as the world seemed to be crumbling in around me was self-protection and fear. Fear about the things that I would lose. Fear about how the church that I was leading, what would happen financially. Fear for our own personal well-being as a family. In many ways, the coronavirus did expose me to all of those things that I hold on to. All of those things that perhaps were more important to me than I had originally thought. You know, one of the things about Jesus that I always found so interesting is, of course, he has all of these I am statements in the Gospel of John. And in the 7 I am statements, one of them in John chapter 6, verse 35 is this phrase where he says, I am the bread of life. Now, of course, he actually harkens back to the journey of the Israelites and to Moses, and during the time, of course, in the wandering of the wilderness when they needed something to eat. And of course, there was this miracle that God had provided to his people, and it was manna from heaven. And one of the stipulations around receiving this manna, of course, was that it would be given to them daily. And every single day they would go and collect the manna. And of course, before Sabbath, they would collect a double portion of that because it wouldn't come on Sabbath. And whenever the people of God would actually try to collect more because of worry or fear or whatever reasons that they had, they would not trust God at his word, that he was going to provide manna from heaven every single day. Of course, what would happen is the food would spoil and the people would begin to learn that God was doing this in a very intentional way, that manna, that this bread from heaven was going to be day by day. And I think it's interesting that Jesus says here, he says, I am the bread of life in John chapter 6, and he refers to this manna. Now, one of the things that I've always wondered about God was, why is it, especially when the people of God are in the wilderness? I mean, one of the things that I think, or that I thought that God would do, is that he would provide manna, abundant portions of manna, but not only manna, that he provide vegetables and filet mignon and all sorts of good stuff, just so that God's people would know how much he deeply loves them and cares for them. But instead, it's manna. It's just bread. Day by day. One day at a time. And so Jesus doesn't say, I am the prime ribeye steak of life. He says, I am the bread of life. I am your sustenance. I am the one that you can rely on. I am the very thing, just like manna in the wilderness, that especially in the tough times, so that you might learn to depend on me. You might learn that I am the only thing you need. I am the bread of life. And in many ways, in this season of the coronavirus, what's been revealed about my own heart is that Jesus is more and that he is everything. And all the things that I was holding on to, slowly the impulse for control, the longing for financial security. And believe me, I didn't realize how much money was an idol to me until this pandemic has hit. And all the worries that have come about whether our church is going to make it and whether our family is going to be okay financially, all of those things have been exposed. You know, I love this quote by Tim Keller where he says, you don't know Jesus is all you need until Jesus is all you have. You don't know Jesus is all you need until Jesus is all you have. And in many ways, in this moment of extreme lack that's happening around the world, what if, for each of us, it was also an invitation not only to lament and grieve and to lean in to serving our neighbors in an intentional way, but what if God was doing something to each of our hearts, to cultivating in us a way to make him king, where we have surrendered all of those things that were below the surface that perhaps we never thought were the things that we were holding on to. In other words, either Jesus, of course, is king over all, which is the theme of this, that he's the king over everything. Either he's the king of all, or he's not king at all. And isn't that true? that God, when Jesus actually calls us, this invitation to surrender to him as the king over everything, he really means everything. And it's especially in these moments of difficulty and trial that we're to come to him like our daily bread and to say, Jesus, be king, be my sustenance, be my dependence, be the one that I submit everything, my future, my present, my past, my fears, my worries, my anxieties, my money, my security, my comfort, all of these things, God, you be the king of all. Perhaps that's the invitation for you and for me. But here's the thing. I know that for you and for me, and wherever you are in your journey with Jesus, maybe you've wondered though, but like, is he the kind of king though? Especially in moments of darkness, especially in moments of lack. What if Jesus has not proven to be reliable enough to me? What happens then? Because at the end of the day, I'm willing to submit or surrender to anyone or to anything as long as that king proved to be someone who was worthy. And the most beautiful thing about the Christian story, though, is that the king that we submit to is not some king with some overarching, authoritative, dominating type of personality who coerces us, who pounds us into submission. No, there's a different story about the king that we surrender to. It's a king who actually invites us to surrender to him. You know, one of my favorite passages in scripture is from Revelation chapter 5. And of course, in the book of Revelation, John, he's exiled on an island. He's by himself. I mean, can you imagine the feelings of aloneness and darkness, the feelings of lack and of yearning? And John is on this island. And of course, he has this vision, this prophetic apocalyptic vision in the book of Revelation. And in this book, there's this moment where it says in Revelation chapter 5, verse 1, "Then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed with 7 seals. Now, scholars have pointed out that this seal is really the unfolding of God's kingdom. And no one, the passage says, "And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, 'Who is worthy to break the seals?'" The unveiling of God's kingdom to address the brokenness, injustice, difficulties of the world. Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll? And there's this moment of lament. But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. And John says, "I wept and I wept because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or to look inside. Then one of the elders said to me, 'Do not weep.'" Now check out what John writes, because look at what the elder says. "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals." I can imagine John in his weeping. He hears, "See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah." I can imagine he begins to hope again, to have hope rise within him. Yes, the Lion who has come with power and strength and might and a mighty roar. This Lion has come, and the Lion is worthy. But look at what happens. He hears the Lion of Judah. And then it says, "Then I saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain." He heard about a lion, and he sees a lamb who has been slain, standing at the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders. And the one who is worthy is the lamb who was slain, the one who would lay down his life, the king who would take on flesh and give his life away so that you and I might have it. What makes Jesus worthy to be the king of us, to surrender everything? It's because, don't you see, he's the king who would give everything away, including his very life, so that you might know that he is a God of abundant, sacrificial, painstaking, faithful love for you and I. He is the one who calls us in the midst of, even in a season of lack, to surrender to him and to say, Jesus, I surrender it all.